There is a version of you that you have never met, a version so cold, so calculated, and so ruthlessly consistent that if you encountered him today, you wouldn't recognize him. You might look at him as if looking at a stranger, and quite possibly, you would be afraid. Not because he is hateful, but because he is nothing like the person you are right now. But the real question isn't whether that version exists. The question is, why have you never dared to face him? The answer doesn't lie in the fact that you aren't ready. It lies in a much more uncomfortable truth. You are too attached, too loyal to the weak version of yourself. The version that begins the day with a small negotiation and ends it with a familiar failure. The version that requires cheers and the watchful eyes of a crowd just to keep a personal promise. The version that collapses the moment life becomes inconvenient, always choosing the path of least resistance, like a moth spiraling toward the familiar flame of comfort. You say you want change, but your actions worship ease. You speak of life's purpose, yet you chase distractions as if they could save you. This is not ignorance. This is a choice repeated every day in moments so small you've convinced yourself they don't matter. If these words feel uncomfortably familiar, this channel was made for you. Stoic Journey is not here to motivate you. It exists to confront you with the version you keep avoiding. The version of you that is ruthlessly consistent doesn't have more motivation than you. He simply stopped negotiating. Every time you listen to that voice that says, just 5 more minutes, or I'll start tomorrow, you are treating your goals like a business deal where you are trying to cheat yourself. You are looking for a discount on excellence. But in the Stoic path, there are no discounts. There is only the full price paid in advance in the currency of discipline. The steel frame of your character is revealed only when you kill the negotiator. Starting tomorrow, stop treating your wake-up call as a suggestion. Stop treating your workout as an option. Stop treating your deep work as something that can be moved. When you make a promise to yourself, it must become a law. A law doesn't care if you feel tired. A law doesn't care if you had a hard day. A law is executed because it is the law. If you're done negotiating with your comfort, subscribe to Stoic Journey. Not to be inspired, but to be reminded of the standard you claim to live by. When you stop negotiating with your comfort, you will feel a shift. The fear of that stranger you haven't met will turn into respect, because that stranger isn't a monster. He is simply a man who has finally stopped lying to the person in the mirror. The world doesn't need more people who want change. It needs people who are tired of being loyal to their own weakness. Stoic Journey is for those people. If that's you, stay and do the work. Kill the negotiator. Let the steel show. Instead of acting, you begin to negotiate. And every single time you lose, you hit the snooze button, not once, but repeatedly. This isn't a harmless gesture to wake up more refreshed. It is the first ballot of the day cast for procrastination, a silent declaration that your comfort is more important than the promise you made to yourself. Like bending a compass needle right at the start, you don't lose your way immediately, but your entire day drifts off course. The second sign is the near-obsessive need for external surveillance to keep your word to yourself. You announce your plans, you post your goals, you hope the eyes of others will become the whip that forces you forward. But this dependency isn't motivation. It is a naked admission that you do not trust yourself without an audience. A person who only keeps a promise when watched is someone who lost their inner integrity a long time ago. The third sign, the most glaring of all, is collapsing the moment you face inconvenience. You always choose the path of least resistance, like water flowing to the lowest point. easy comfort over a healthy meal, passive entertainment over deep, demanding work. Immediate pleasure is always prioritized over long-term goals. These are not isolated decisions. They are a system perfectly designed to keep you exactly where you are. These observations are not meant to comfort or soothe you. They are an indictment, an accusation that you have lived in self-deception for too long, surrendering control to the weakest version of yourself. It is time to face the truth. You do not lack time. You lack truth. And to break this cycle, you don't need more hacks or fleeting inspiration. You need a new operating system, a set of rules that leaves no room for weakness. In this context, Stoicism offers no consolation. It strips you bare. It is not an academic lecture to make you feel wise. It is a tool, a weapon, an operating system for action. It forces you to stand before your own reflection and answer one single, unavoidable question. Am I truly the person I claim to be? Or am I just playing a part when things are easy? The Stoic operates based on ironclad principles, non-negotiable truths. First, virtue is action, not intention. Noble thoughts and grand plans are merely scrap paper if they are not expressed through consistent, repeated behavior. You are not what you say. You are what you do, especially when no one is watching. Second, freedom is not a gift. It must be seized through self-mastery. As Epictetus said, not to invite reflection but to end the debate, no man is free who is not master of himself. You are not free when you are a slave to your moods. You are not free when exhaustion, the urge for comfort, or the fear of discomfort decides for you. True freedom is the capacity to do what you committed to, regardless of internal emotions or external circumstances. Think of this principle as a hammer strike. It nails down every internal argument, every excuse, and every hesitation. From here on, there is no more discussion. There is only the standard. The negotiator versus the executor. Most people live in a familiar state, negotiation mode. They wake up and negotiate with their bed. They walk into the gym and negotiate with every set of weights. They sit down to work and negotiate with every minute of distraction. Their life is an endless string of transactions with a weaker self, always trying to trade progress for a bit of ease, as if every day were a small bargain just to be left in peace. But there is another mode of operation, a mode that very few ever reach. It is execution mode. In this mode, there is no dialogue. There is no debate. The alarm rings, you stand up. The schedule arrives, you act. There is no resentment, there is no hesitation, there is no checking to see how you feel today. Emotions are not invited to the decision-making process. You do not ask exhaustion for its opinion. You do not consult laziness. You simply execute. This is the silent but absolute boundary between two destinies. The average person negotiates. You execute. And when you stop negotiating, you enter a world that is nearly invisible to most. They cannot point out exactly what has changed, but they feel it. You no longer react as you once did. You do not flinch under pressure. You do not explain your moves. Your presence becomes heavier, more solid, like a boulder standing still in a rushing river. And it is that very stability that makes others uneasy. This new version of you is lean, clear, and direct. It leaves no room for guesswork, for doubt, or for the need to reassure others that you are still playing a small game like they are. But this transformation never occurs in peace. It demands a specific kind of violence, not a violence directed outward, but an internal violence required to shatter the old self. It is a silent violence, a deliberate, cold act intended to break and discard the weak, demanding, and procrastinating parts of your soul. You do not argue with them. You do not try to persuade them. You simply stop feeding them with your attention. You starve them by refusing to participate in their familiar dialogues. The old voice, the voice of excuses and weakness, will not vanish peacefully. It will fight for survival. When you impose a new, non-negotiable standard, it will scream. It will hurl every reason, every sensation of discomfort, and every memory of failure at you to drag you back to the old path. It tells you that you are tired, that you deserve to rest, that tomorrow will be better. But you continue. In silence. You do not argue. You simply act. Over time, that voice weakens. It no longer has the strength to scream. It begins to whisper. A small suggestion, a familiar temptation, a seemingly harmless question, just for today. What's the harm? You still do not answer. You simply continue the repetition of action. Then one day, it goes silent, utterly silent. This silence is not empty. It is not soulless. It is a sacred silence, like the moment the sea calms after a storm. In that silence, you realize you no longer belong to fleeting urges or doubts. You belong to your own promise. And that act of breaking was never a punishment. It was an act of liberation. People are often mistaken, believing that discipline is a cage that imprisons them. That is a lie, created and spread by those who have never lived with it long enough to understand. Discipline is not a cage. It is a razor-sharp blade, a blade that cuts away the chaos, the indecision, and the mental fatigue born from having to argue with yourself day after day. Most people are not exhausted because they do too much, but because they have to redecide everything every single day. In the morning, you have to convince yourself to act. At night, you have to face the guilt of not doing what you knew was necessary. Discipline ends that cycle. It eliminates the bargaining. And when the bargaining disappears, a rare sensation emerges. Relief. The morning is no longer an internal war. You don't need to waste energy persuading yourself to stand up or to begin. The new day no longer opens with a small defeat. The evening is no longer a courtroom of conscience. There is no longer a list of things you should have done. There is only a deep peace in knowing that whether the day was easy or hard, you lived true to your principles. In a world of constant flux, discipline becomes an unshakable lifeline when everything else around you wavers. It is the rare structure over which you have absolute control. And the core shift lies not in schedules or habits, but in identity. You act not because you feel like it. You act because that is who you are now. That identity is immovable because it is not built on fleeting emotions or momentary motivation. It is forged from principle, from repetition, and from a consistency created in silence, not through loud declarations seeking approval. And that inner freedom, in the end, manifests itself through another powerful tool: silence. There was a time, quite possibly, when you shared almost every decision you made. Your new goals, the plans you had just started, the promises that this time everything would be different. You spoke of your new schedule, your early mornings, your diet, and your training. You spoke as if letting others know would hold you accountable, as if the gaze of the crowd could keep your promise for you. But it never worked. You know that. Because speaking gave you the sensation of progress without any of the sacrifice. It was like taking a deep breath before a race, then stopping because you felt like you had already started. The pressure was released too early. The flame was extinguished before it could even catch fire. Over time, you learn a truth that no one tells you directly. When you speak too soon, you waste the energy required to change. You bleed off the pressure before it can build into power. True transformation doesn't need a megaphone. It needs silence. Silence is a strategic tool. It is a shield that protects your focus from the noise, from mindless questions, and from the doubts of others. It liberates you from the need for validation, a need that silently erodes every bit of resolve. In silence, you create a sacred space where the real work is done, uninterrupted, undiluted, and unexplained. Others will react to your silence. They will call you cold, distant, or even arrogant. But what they truly feel is not your lack of emotion. It is your stillness. And stillness always makes those who live in chaos feel uneasy. Your focus reflects their lack of direction. Your consistency exposes the excuses they have never dared to face. This silence does not mean you are heartless. It simply means you have learned to put emotion in its rightful place. A common misconception is that a disciplined person is emotionless, as if they have ceased to feel altogether. But the truth is exactly the opposite. A disciplined person feels everything, every crushing pressure, every wave of doubt, every ounce of exhaustion creeping into their body. They are not emotionally numb. They simply do not allow emotion to hold the steering wheel. The difference lies not in whether you feel, but in whether you obey. Emotion is like the wind to a ship. It is real, it is powerful, and if you have no anchor, no rudder, it will blow you in whatever direction it pleases. But when you are a conscious captain, you do not let the wind decide your destination. You observe it. You trim the sails. You hold the course, even when sailing against the wind. You are the captain, not the wind. You control your response. Emotion does not control the ship. Emotions are data, not commands. They merely provide information. I am tired. I am bored. I am afraid. The disciplined person listens to those signals, but the final decision is never based on a fleeting mood. It is based on the goal, on principle, on who they have committed to becoming. They still hear the familiar voices, the calls of procrastination, of fear, of ease, but over time they develop a second voice, a calm inner voice that does not argue, does not panic, and does not need to explain. It does not engage in dialogue. It simply utters a single command. Continue. Not because the emotions aren't real, but because they lack authority. It is this mastery over emotion that allows you to do what most people dare not. Raise the standards of your own life, even when it doesn't feel comfortable. You are not exhausted because you tried too hard. You are exhausted because you have lived below your own potential. And deep down, you know it. It is not the workload that drains you. It is the weight of compromise. It is waking up with a clear plan only to let it dissolve before noon. It is breaking promises to yourself so many times that they no longer hurt. They just feel empty. This is a kind of fatigue that no amount of sleep can heal, for it does not reside in the body. It resides in repeated self-betrayal. Low standards carry a deceptive weight. They allow you to take shortcuts, to make excuses, to be soft in the moment. Everything feels fine for now, but over time, they create a low standard loop. You feel guilty for not doing what you know is necessary. Then a brief surge of motivation appears to compensate. That motivation quickly runs dry, leading to burnout. And finally, you return to the initial guilt. This cycle doesn't just suck your energy dry, it erodes your self-respect piece by piece. Conversely, high standards, when transformed into non-negotiable actions, do not lead to exhaustion. They lead to peace. Because they eliminate the energy wasted on endless internal arguments. You no longer have to decide every day whether to do the basics. That decision was made long ago. And that is where stability begins. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." This doesn't just mean accepting your strengths. It means facing the parts of yourself you have allowed to drift for too long. Raising your standards is a silent act of violence against your old self. A definitive decision to say, "I do not care how I have lived until now. This is where I draw the line." The vote of repetition. The mechanism for building that boundary, for reinforcing this new identity, is repetition. Repetition does more than create habits. It reprograms your identity at the deepest level. This process is ruthless, but effective. Every action you take is a vote for the person you are becoming. Every time you wake up on time is a vote for discipline. Every workout completed when you didn't want to is a vote for strength. Every time you keep a promise to yourself in silence is a vote for reliability. Repetition strips you bare. It exposes every story you ever told yourself. It is like a carving knife, silently shaving away the parts that are not you. Small actions, repeated consistently, without drama and without an audience, define the new man. The old self isn't killed. It simply no longer has a place to live. Old habits and thoughts are starved. They wither away because they are no longer fed by attention or compromise. When discipline and repetition become ingrained in who you are, when standards become your foundation, you become dangerous. Not in the sense of controlling others, but in a way that is far rarer. You have absolute control over yourself. In a world where most people are led by fleeting urges and emotional chaos, a person with self-mastery is a force to be reckoned with. Your presence carries weight, and your consistency creates gravity. You do not need more motivation. You need principles. Motivation is an emotion. It comes and goes like the weather. There are sunny days, rainy days, and most of the time it is unpredictable. Principles are different. They are a structure. They stand firm like the foundation of a building, silent, unassuming, but holding everything together, preventing collapse. Discipline is not punishment. It is self-respect. It is how you prove to yourself that your efforts have value, that your time is not being squandered, that your goals are worthy of pursuit, even when no spark of excitement arrives to make things easier. If you are still here, if these words haven't driven you away, then you have already made your choice. No announcement is needed. No grand declaration is required. True change is never loud. It begins with a quiet decision, an internal shift that no one else can see. Subscribing to Stoic Journey is not about watching another video. It is a marker, a silent commitment. I will no longer live beneath my own standard. The old version of you, the one who hesitated, who needed to be convinced, who always found an excuse, has finished his performance. What remains does not negotiate, does not explain, does not wait. Just move. Just act. Just become.